Hi, I'm Ryan. Let's talk about international relations theory. Today, I want to discuss the loss of the empire, how empires collapsed. Um, Empires collapsed mainly due to the 30 Years' War, which led to the creation of the system of states. And the system of states created anarchy. And anarchy is where international relations takes place. But first, let's go way back to another 30 Years' War, 27 years to be exact, the Peloponnesian War. This guy, Thucydides, Thucydides was an Athenian general who fought in the Peloponnesian War. At some point, he contracted the plague and was exiled to an island where he wrote history of the Peloponnesian War and later died. He died sometime before the war ended. In fact, it's very likely that he died before finishing his book. It sort of just stops in the middle of the action, and he doesn't know how the war ended. We don't know his exact date of death or even year, but we know that Thucydides did not survive the war. There's a very good chance that if you are an undergraduate political science major, you will read this. And there's an almost 100% chance that if you are a graduate student in political science, international relations, international studies, security studies, whatever, you probably read it numerous times and memorized certain passages. So Thucydides, he was responding to this novel invention called the city-state and the consequence of the city-state, which is the balance of power and subsequent war. As one state grows too powerful, the dominant power will become afraid and will likely attack. Also, alliances start forming, popping into existence, alliances that you might never expect. They pop into existence. They defeat the rising power, and then they pop out of existence. So city-states were a product of the Greco-Persian War. In the aftermath of the Greco-Persian War, which was a Greek victory, several territories were liberated. They formed city-states. One of these was Athens. Athens was a seafaring city-state, very intellectual. All of your poets and your artists and your historians, they moved to Athens. Athens built a very large navy or acquired ships into its navy. The wall around the Acropolis was destroyed during the Greco-Persian War, so they rebuilt the wall. Sparta was a warrior society. It was the dominant Greek military power at the time. And Sparta, being the hegemon, started noticing that Athens was growing both militarily and economically. And Sparta got really nervous about this, said, "What are you doing? Why are you building this massive navy? Why are you building a wall around your city? Who are you trying to keep out? What are you trying to hide?" So to Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War had one very obvious cause, and this is a quote directly from History of the Peloponnesian War: "The growth of the power of Athens and the alarm which this inspired in Sparta made war inevitable." So to Thucydides, it's physics, not psychology. He has a mechanical answer to what he perceives as a mechanical problem. Rising power, declining power, war happens here. Power is equal to the product of force on velocity. The velocity of shifting power. This is where war happens. In other words, once city-states existed, If a weaker power grew too powerful, the dominant power has to go to war with the emerging power. It's not in anyone's control. It's physics, not psychology. The dominant power fails to go to war, and the emerging power will overtake them. And then they will not be able to survive a subsequent war. Another equation to remember is life is preferable to death. Let's bring psychology back into it. Maybe I'm being a little bit, hyperbolic when I say it's physics, not psychology, because even Thucydides notes the alarm which this inspired in Sparta made war inevitable. The word fear, alarm. So bring psychology a little bit into it. Life is preferable to death in a general sense. Human beings are rational actors. We make rational decisions based on how the decisions will affect us. So typically speaking, we will do things that prolong life and avoid things that shorten life. Cigarettes and beer, notwithstanding. So Sparta's sitting there saying, if I don't attack Athens, I might die. But if I attack Athens, I'll probably live. The benefit of attacking is potentially prolonged life, and the cost of not attacking is potentially shortened life, sooner death. So the consequences, states are not in control. It's physics, not psychology. There are systemic structures that create forces on states that are impossible to change. Ideas don't matter. The goal of peace in Greece doesn't matter. Intentions don't matter. Athens built a wall around the Acropolis, maybe because they're just used to having a wall there. Maybe they want to protect the Acropolis from, typhoons. Well, maybe there's some non-military reason why they want to build that wall. The intention of the wall doesn't matter. Identities don't matter. The idea that we're all Greek doesn't matter. It's shifts in the balance of power that matters. Only capabilities, power, that's what matters. So Thucydides, he sort of invented the international relations as a field of study. He realizes that city-states create sovereignty or self-rule. And he's noticing that something went wrong under a sovereign system of sovereign city-states. Things are getting out of control. Athens is growing. Everyone tried to stop the war. No one could. We can apply this contemporarily. Graham Allison wrote a book called The Thucydides Trap. I have it digitally on my Kindle, so I can't hold it up like I can History of the Peloponnesian War. He's noting that, hey, in history, there have been all these Thucydides traps where rising power challenges the dominant power and it leads to war. But there are a few that haven't led to war. For example, the United States overtaking the Soviet Union. The question is, right now, China's rising, America's on the decline. When we get into this danger zone, will it automatically lead to war? Will the laws of physics require a war between the United States and China? One with consequences called mutual assured destruction, the extinction of the human species. Political scientists are working on this. There aren't any good answers. We'll get into complex interdependence, liberalism. And a lot of people say, hey, both the United States and China have too much to gain by avoiding war economically, financially, and too much to lose financially, economically, if they go to war. There are some alternatives to the Thucydides trap. David Hume, he read Thucydides. He looked at the same evidence that Thucydides looked at, and he came to a radically different conclusion. He agrees with Rousseau on the question of human nature. He says Hobbes is wrong, Thucydides is wrong. Human beings are not evil and violent by nature. He also says that there's no systemic structure forcing states to go to war with each other. He says people have choice, we have agency. We can self-restrain ourselves. We can choose peace over war. You know what? Most of the time, that's what we choose. Think about all the wars that we haven't had. The United States is not at war right now. We are not sending troops to Mexico, even though it might be in our interest. We are not taking over Bangladesh. We could. We're not at war with China. We could be. The Thucydides trap says that we should be, or that we should be going to war. But we've restrained ourselves. So we're still not to international relations. We're getting there. The kingdoms, the empires are collapsing. One empire in particular is on its way out. At the same time, there's a civil war going off in England. Interestingly, Thomas Hobbes doesn't really seem to notice what's happening here. He only notices what's happening here. So Charlemagne's empire, he created an empire that became the Holy Roman Empire. It was imperially unified. He created a system with dukes that had high autonomy. This is a feudal system. He religiously justified the unification. He invented Christendom, invented God. And unfortunately for him, it's time to kill God. That's what we're going to do right now. So the consequences of the Holy Roman Empire: truth precludes politics. A single truth precludes politics. The single truth requires the religious mandate. So God over politics. Politics requires the acceptance of multiple truths. If you're going to have a political debate, you have to invite more than one truth into the debate. Politics requires that we accept the legitimacy of the other. Otherwise, there's no debate. International politics requires secularism. The Holy Roman Empire cannot do international politics because they're not part of Christendom. They don't follow the same beliefs that we do. They are the other. We do not accept them. It's only by accepting that non-members of Christendom are legitimate that you can do international politics. So Erasmus comes along and he says, now, wait a minute. He writes In Praise of Folly, 1511, and he redefines the relationship between man and God. He invents and justifies humanism, liberal individuality. He implicitly undermines the empire. He denies the universality of divinity. He implicitly creates the basis for wider legitimacy, meaning more people, more others are legitimate, and secular politics. Sound familiar? It should, because just a few years later, someone did it explicitly. Martin Luther writes the Reformation. He redefines the relationship between man and God. He invents the priesthood of the believer. No longer do you have to go to the priest to have a conversation with God, to use the priest as proxy for God himself or herself. You have to, no longer do you have to do that. You can have a personal relationship with God. Martin Luther justifies the independence of the princes from the church. Your princes, your dukes, your kings, your queens, they don't have to get justification from the church, authority from the church. They can choose to do things on their own. This explicitly undermines the legitimacy of the church. Once the Holy Roman Empire started to break up, came the Renaissance. Humanism shifting truths from the empire, from the church to the individual. Multiple truths. We accept them. But the product is chaos, a schism, Catholicism versus Protestantism, the formative calamity, the 30 years war, powerful forces at work. We've already covered them with Thucydides, but we poorly understand them. Statesmen are going crazy trying to stop the war, trying to prevent it, trying to stop the battles, stop the bloodshed. Incredible suffering, incredible destruction. States are doing weird stuff like forming alliances. These alliances pop into existence, they defeat their enemy, and then they pop out of existence. It's a zero-sum game. States desire total victory, no compromise. Eventually, everyone died, and the empire collapsed. This is the loss of population. Some places lost over 50%. So we invented international relations by killing God. Does this solve the problem? Here's the signing of the treaties of Westphalia. All these guys look pretty much the same. They got their little mustaches and same haircuts, same beards. Did this solve the problem? So the Peace of Westphalia, it was supposed to prevent war. It created sovereignty and therefore anarchy. There's no higher power above the principality, the kingdom, the state. There's no global police force that can punish states for misbehaving. So therefore, it's an anarchical system. We've reduced the power of the church to almost nothing. You had the Holy Roman Empire, now is reduced to this little tiny city-state called the Vatican City. The princes were free to control their territory however they wanted. I operate my monopoly of violence however I want to. You operate your monopoly of violence however you want to. I kill my people how I see fit and for the reasons that I see fit. You kill your people for the reasons that you see fit and however you want to do it. But there's no imperial unification. How do you justify it? There's no religious justification. There's chaos. At one point, there's over 300 states. So how is this all going to work? So that brings us to the next video. This slide is a remnant from when I was teaching this. Ignore the first half of next week. We're going to be looking at the consequences of Westphalia, creating the modern world. We're going to be looking at international relations theory. Thank you for watching. Till next time, see ya.